Welcome back. This is American Bulldog and Company, episode number 3. Today we brought on Martin with Fuerza American Bulldogs. Martin and I don't know each other personally, and this will be the first time that I'm interviewing somebody that I don't know personally. And what struck me about you in particular was that I had listened to some other podcasts that you had done with Battlebred, and I believe the other one's called maybe the Bulldog Social or something along that
Yeah.
line. And the one thing that struck me about you was that you were really passionate about your dogs, and that you seemingly were very detail oriented as far as keeping notes and tracking your litters, which I don't do as much anymore, and I think it's maybe a volume thing. Sometimes I question if I should do it more. Um, but I used to keep all the notes with the size of the puppies when they first came out, obviously the time they were born. I still do that initially, but those pieces of paper seem to get lost wayward. After about 4 or 5 weeks, I kind of subside on the information. So welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on and taking the time out to do this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So let's get into, and I'm going to try to keep this a little different than what you've done in the past. And I really encourage everybody to go out there and listen to those other podcasts that you've done, because there is some valuable stuff. Where I want to get a little deeper into is actually with the breeding part of it. But I do want to give everyone a background of you and how you got into the dogs in general. So let's start with that. When did you decide, or how did you decide that you were going to get into American Bulldogs, and roughly what was that time frame?
So when I was a kid, I had dogs, and we had fowl, and we had some acreage with my parents. And I went from shepherd type dogs to American Pit Bull Terriers, and that's the only really bully breed I knew about, except English Bulldogs when I was a kid. And then when I had some pit bulls, I saw that American bullies were coming out, but I didn't know them as American bullies. I just called them the big pit bulls. And wanting one is kind of how I ran into the American bulldog. So I was lifting weights one day, and I mentioned to somebody that I had the pit bulls and I had some puppies. And JC Picking from American Bulldog DDP, it's like, hey, I got some puppies, and he showed me pictures of his adult dogs and everything. And from there, that's kind of how I got into the American Bulldog. I wasn't too crazy about the underbites and the short muzzles because I was used to seeing American Pit Bull Terriers, but I grew into liking them when I saw them in person.
How long were you into the pit bull terriers before you got into the American Bulldogs?
Oh, not very long. Probably like 2.5, 3 years, and they were backyard dogs that I bought for like $50 to $250 from the newspaper.
And what did you like about that breed in particular when you first got into them?
Versatility, powerful, uh, kind of maybe a culture thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. And the one thing I'm sure we're going to touch on in this episode is there's a huge difference and disparity between the West Coast dogs and the East Coast. There's undoubtedly a big difference. And if you haven't been on this side of the country to see the dogs on this side, or me inversely going out west, but I just know from my experience, seeing a lot of pictures and videos from other breeders that I followed for many years, that the size is one of the and type is quite different. Even what people will refer to on the West Coast as hybrid would not fly on this side of the country as such. Typically, they would probably lean more towards bully. So going back, so you get your first dog and you get it off JC Picking. DDP is his kennel name.
yeah.
Um, you get a male, a female. What did you decide to start with?
I got a second pick female,
Okay,
and
and
I didn't pay too much. I think I just gave him a few $100, and I worked on his car for a trade.
okay, and was the intention right away? It sounded like you had already dabbled with breeding the pit bulls. Had you decided that maybe you were gonna take that step with American Bulldogs, or were you just kinda like, "Hey, this is just something new and I wanna try something else out?"
I was actually my very first. What I wanted to do was outcross. I wanted to just cross a pit bull with an American bulldog. And then once I had the American bulldog, and I got so many compliments because it was a bully dog. The first one I got, she was a good looking puppy. She never had like a lanky stage. She was really good looking the whole time. I got so many compliments, it kind of just made my head big. And then said, "Nah, I'm just gonna keep with the American bulldog." And I never really said that I was gonna like buy a male and had litters. My thought was just like buy two more. That was my initial thought for like a year and a half.
Okay. Yeah, it's so what year would you say this is roughly?
That was I got my hands on her in 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I kind of predate you a little bit within the breed, but I remember I think I got my first dog 96, 97, and I remember back then like they were almost unheard of. And if you went out in public with the damn dog, everybody and their brother would stop you. It didn't matter. They were just like, "What is that? I got to get me one of those. Where did you get it?" Um, and I still think that the breed um has that notoriety. I think a little bit more people know about them, but I still think if you have a well-bred American Bulldog, it's going to stop traffic for sure. Um, so you get into this first dog. How long did it take you to get another?
Well, she came into her second heat and we actually bred her back to one of JC's dogs. And then that was we only had one puppy, and that was my second dog.
Okay, so by default, you got to pick the the only one that
Yeah,
was
that
there. And
was
was
the
that a
only
male or
one. It was
male
a
or
male.
female?
Yeah,
It
it
was a
was a
male.
male.
Okay. And at this point, had you noticed any big difference between having the pit bulls and then the demeanor or the disposition temperament of an American Bulldog?
Yeah, for the pit bull type dogs I had, and then compared to the American bulldogs I have, the American bulldogs were closer to me, like more of a people dog, but not just close to me. My pit bull, like one of my pit bulls chose my girlfriend, and then it was just her dog, even though I bought it.
No.
And then the American bulldog was that way too, but not just with one person. It was more of a people dog, and it wouldn't escape my fence. It wouldn't get out. It wouldn't dig as much. Those pit bulls I had were just harder to keep.
Yeah, that is the one thing that I think has held true to this breed overall. I live on 5.25 acres. I abut 1,000 acres a farm, and then I've got about 8 acres of woods in between me and my other neighbor. And I literally have no containment whatsoever when a dog is out loose, and they will not go anywhere. If I'm outside, they'll be outside. If I'm inside, they want to be inside, and they literally I have some dogs I swear that would live inside my sweatshirt if they had the opportunity. Um, and I think you're right as far as they still will kind of pick a person, but they're still pretty friendly overall to friends and family. I think they're just a people oriented dog. And in that respect, I think they're really easy to keep. So you you've got the female, the adult female, you've got this pup. You're kind of landlocked, so you're probably not thinking that you should breed those two together again at this point in your career. So you decide at what point do you pick up another dog?
So the female I had gotten originally, I actually sold her. The breeder I got her from, I spoke with him, and then he found another home for her. At that point, I was opening my business and I was having a child at the same time. So I said I'm gonna cut down to the one male. And I didn't think about breeding for a little while, but I always knew like as soon as I can, I'm gonna get another dog. And it wasn't too long. It was maybe a year and a half. Things weren't as hard as I thought they were gonna be. They were still difficult, but I was still able to get another dog. I went back to JC, and we tried to get a female. Him and I were gonna co-own one, and he spoke to another breeder in the state of Colorado. Maybe it was Nevada. I don't want to even know who the breeder was because it was a horrible experience. He had the dog shipped to his house, and then I was going to go pick it up. And he told me that it came in the back of a hatchback that looked like a trunk, and the dog was not in good condition. Like the dog was, you could see its spine, you could see its ribs, and it looked like, I don't know, maybe it was 16 pounds and it was supposedly 6 months old.
Mm.
And JC is
Yeah.
like, "Do you want me to keep it here or you want to take it home?" I'm like, "I'll just take it home. I'll see what's wrong. I'll feed it." This guy wasn't feeding it. And I took it home, and the mailman called animal control on me not too long after, which was not a big deal. It got worked out. I took it to the vet, and I think what the vet told me, didn't the vet didn't really do a bunch of stuff. He just examined it, and he said maybe its pancreas wasn't developed or something like that. And the dog got put down, and then I moved on to the next dog I was gonna get.
Yeah, it's always a shame, you know, I haven't heard too many horror stories over the years, but I have heard a few. And it is a shame when, you know, people are willing to even try to move a dog in that
Yeah,
condition. It just seems I mean, I've had some older dogs. I've got one now that I've been trying to rehome for a couple years now, and she's got a bum knee, and she's fine, she's functional, it is what it is. But by no means is she in bad shape. And I still personally don't necessarily feel great about rehoming a dog with a bad knee, but in she's on a crate and rotate in our house, and it would just be nice for her to be, on her own, have her own space, her own couch, her own family, just to kind of to do the twilight years in. Um, but to send a dog to somebody that's emaciated with clearly a medical issue, whether the guy was doing his due diligence and trying to feed it and it just wasn't working, I mean, he's take it to the vet and figure it out. Don't push that problem onto someone else. That's a little disheartening to hear. But
yeah.
um, so let me ask you this, and I'm going to touch on it now because it's going to come up in the future. So these initial dogs that you have don't carry the heavy color that you're now known for, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and uh, how long down the road did you get before you started introducing the color into the program?
So what happened first is I was having the white dogs, and I would only see the white dogs here with the other breeder, and then he brought a red dog in, and I thought that was really cool. And I said, all right, now I want a red dog because, we're seeing is white dogs, and now here's a red dog with nice black pigment all the way around the eyes, and I really like that. He had one that had liver nose, but I like the black pigment red, and some of them would have like these dark spots by the eye down the eyes. I forget what they're called, but I like that. I got a dog like that, but to really be like off standard, out of standard colored dogs wasn't until they came over here into Oregon, maybe about 2018, and then late 2019 is when I got my first black dog.
Okay, and I know colors. It's always been a tumultuous issue within American Bulldogs, and I don't really want to get into the who, what, whys, or wheres. At this point, it's a part of the breed. It's more accepted now than it ever has been.
Yeah.
What made you decide that maybe a black dog? Um, w- what was the reasoning behind wanting a black dog versus, like you just said maybe a red dog or a white dog? Was it just at that time it was new enough that maybe gave you an edge in your breeding program, or you just overall like the type of those dogs and the way that they looked?
So I didn't like the colored dogs at first when I first heard about them and I was learning about the history of the breed. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound right. I don't, that's not what I want. And then I started seeing some, and I started looking at the pedigrees, and I'm like, all right, there's not nothing too crazy. And I saw some programs that had color. They weren't heavy color, but they had color in them. And those programs were really good. And I said, well, I'm kind of the type of more creative person. Like, I like classic cars. I like lowriders in particular. And those cars have really nice paint jobs, and they turn heads from far away. It's the first thing you see on one of those cars. But I have those cars, and those cars would break down on me because I'd work on them myself. So it was very embarrassing when your car would stall out at a red light, but it just had a beautiful candy paint job on them. And then when I got my car running right and I met some mechanics and I kind of knew how to work on cars a little better in my mid late 20s, I'm like, well, I'm going to do the same with dogs. I know I'm going to get criticized. Not everyone's going to like it. But if I have a really nice dog and that happens to be black, that happens to be whatever color, I'll take a little more pride. And I know I'm going to be looked at and scrutinized for having any flaw with a colored dog. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because in my notes with you, from the pre-interview questionnaire, that was one of the notes that I
Yeah.
wrote down was that you felt like you were more scrutinized because you did have the colored dogs. Um, and it's weird because on the East Coast, we've got Confederate, and Confederate's a standard breeder. They primarily breed for catch dogs, and real kind of utility work dogs. And, he's got the black lines and then, you know, his own black line, and then you kind of flip flop over to stuff that came off of Gaucho and then Kennedy, and those dogs are totally different types. I mean, just
Yeah.
100% totally different dogs. Um, I think now, with as many people that have the colored stuff, I think the newness is wearing off. I still think that, there's some advantages to having heavy colored dogs, and there's probably some disadvantages to it, and maybe we'll talk about that later. I'm not sure that I feel that I scrutinize anybody more because they have the colored dogs, but it's I think at this point it's just the way that the breed is going. People are just going to do what they're going to do. And I think I've spoke about this before. The more I get into the history of the breed, I mean, I pretty much have kind of concluded that we're a little bit more evolved band dog anyways. The nice
Yeah.
thing about it is we do have a good bit of genetic diversity that within the American Bulldog umbrella, you still have a lot of ways to play with things, and it's still kind of the same mentality as a band dog breeder, and you kind of fit you're building dogs for what you want to build them for, whether that be pet homes, working dogs, catch dogs, who knows, just whatever you want to do. You have the ability to do that within the American Bulldog umbrella. Don't really need to necessarily go out and crossbreed. So let's back up. So you got you sold off the female, you got the male, and you just starting your family. The family's kind of getting some legs under it, and now you decide you're going to keep moving forward. Where do you go to for your next breed stock?
So I did go back to JC and got a second female. Since the co-own didn't work, we kind of took some of that into one of the litters he had, and I got a female from him. And then I had that dog, and I decided to breed that dog on her second heat, back to her sire.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you went all in on inbreeding right off the rip. So that second litter
Uh,
into American
yeah.
Bulldogs, and you take her back to her sire. Interesting. And how did you feel that litter turned out?
That litter. Well, I wasn't. I was expecting it to get the sire, and I didn't get the sire. I got versions in between the mother and the sire, which makes sense now. But I was hoping to just get dogs that look like the sire. Very bully, very stocky, pretty much extreme. Breathing wasn't as great as I wanted, but I was, just wishing. Probably shouldn't have done that to begin with at all. But I kept two puppies from that litter. I kept them into adulthood. I didn't have great luck with them, but that was the litter I had. I sold the other four to pet homes.
Okay. I did notice in your notes that along the way, and maybe we'll talk about these litters as we go along, but it sounded like, and maybe this is one of them from memory, um, you made the statement that in your early breeding career, you were picking the wrong puppies.
Yeah.
Is that part of that litter potentially?
Um, I was go. Yeah, yeah, you could say that.
Okay. And I so, w w how have you changed the way that you assess your pups now? What methodologies have you used to try to get what you think you want for the program?
So before I was just picking for the most basic. I need a female. I like this color, and I want the biggest one. That was it. You know, if I could, my eye was really green. If I could tell, hey, this one has a much squarer head, then this one has a more round head, but this one's bigger. I might have gone for the bigger one because back then I wanted just big dogs. My goal was like a 130-pound dog, and that's not today. Today I'm fine with 110, maybe even 105. 105 is a little small, but I don't mind that if everything else is okay and I'm happy with it. I don't really want anything bigger than like 118 at the moment. Maybe later on I'll have something bigger, but not. That's a little on the big side for me. I have more trouble. I feel like flaws are, you could see them a little more when the dog is taller, longer. Um, and it's just, for me, it's harder to have a nice bully dog when it's too big. It's more difficult. The proportions would have to be more extreme for what I want, for what I like, and what the market really wants too, because I sell these to families.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a breeder that's known for size by any means, and I've always been told that correct small and correct trumps large and structurally flawed, and you can always build yourself up in size with, maintaining good structure if you make the structure your kinda your forefront, in priority. Um There was something there I was gonna ask you about selection, but so essentially, in the beginning, and I think everybody falls into this in their first couple litters is like,
Yeah.
oh, the biggest one's the best one. I mean, that's
Yeah.
how it goes. It's like, oh, it's got to be, that's what it is. Um, have you seen any dogs that you thought were the bigger in the litter down the line, maybe not even turn out as big as some of the smaller pups? Have you seen
Well,
it?
what
Have you
I
seen always that they've always correlated the same way? Size of the
they
puppy was the size of the
most of the time they do correlate, but not in the same way that you would think. I would find the biggest, fattest puppy, and sure, he was the tallest, but he not always the heaviest. I would just have long legs, and then
Mhm.
the other thing would be out of proportion. And then my smaller dogs would tend to be bullier for some reason with the blood I was working with at first.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, I tend to see the same thing, I guess, and we have 2 totally different programs, so I have to kind of
Yeah,
say that, but anytime I get a little bit more leg, it seems like the dogs tend to be more hybrid, and anytime, they have less leg, they usually carry way more mass and then typically end up considerably more bully.
yeah.
Um, structurally, I think they all kinda stay the same, but, for me anyways, but I think just the disparity in the types, is definitely different. Um, so okay, so you get this you got a new female, you breed her back to her sire, you keep a couple pups. Where are we going from there?
So the pups I kept, there was one female, one male. They were both inbred, and then I didn't know where to go. I
Oh
had
boy.
inbred dogs, and the pup I kept from the first litter was also inbred. He got bred to his, or like some people will call it line bred, half sibling, I believe that was. And I didn't want to breed them together yet because, tight dog, tight dog. I wasn't sure, but down the line, a couple years, I did do that, and it was a train wreck. It was not
Really?
good. Nothing worth keeping. Half of them worth pets.
Hmm.
So that was
Yeah,
pretty bad.
I did look back at one of your pedigrees, and I'm not gonna have the dog's name off the top of my head, but I know it was, it had 3 shots of Ballard's. I'm going off memory. Chocolate sexy? Sexy chocolate?
Yeah,
Does that sound
he
right?
goes by Rocco. Yeah, sexual
Rocco, yep.
chocolate.
Say that's it. Yep, that was the dog. So, that dog was actually, I saw a breeding that looks like you had done that was the result of a half sibling breeding, take that dog, to a, Rocco times another female to an outcross and brought those 3
Yeah.
generations back together. And did you have success with that litter?
So I kept two out of there. That's a very recent. Those pups are 7 months old right now.
Okay, all right.
So I would consider that successful. Three of them are breed stock quality. One of them has two flaws, so I'm kind of waiting until adulthood to decide if I put her in a pet home and fix her because she's blue.
Okay.
So I don't want to just sell her because it's going to get bred with my name on it.
And I've noticed with you, from listening to the other podcasts that you are one thing that picked up with me was that your real goal is like 7 out of 7 puppies to carry the same type in a litter. You're really like I've noticed that you're like it bothers you when the whole litter doesn't look consistent.
It
Um,
really does because my customers want something that looks like that, and I sell it to them, and then it doesn't look like what they want. And with these dogs, I'm at a point where just a little bit makes a difference. It's almost like we're like it's as much as the color. Like people want this color, they contact me and they say, "Hey, I need a female this color," or "Hey, I need a male that color." And if I don't have it, they're not getting anything. That
yeah,
is probably half of the people who contact me, and that's kind
I
of
get it's an interesting perspective for
yeah,
me because I don't I have like I mean I have color in my program, but it's not necessarily what I will call the new kind of color scheme with the blacks, the dilutes to the black, um, the reds with the dilutes being the chocolates and the
yeah,
lavenders or whatever the blue fawns, stuff like that. Um, that's an interesting side to a breeding program now because you've introduced this color and now you're kind of hung on it because people want a certain specific color from you, which is an interesting perspective. Um, do you find like now you're pigeonholed into only having colored dogs?
maybe. And because when I got my first color dog, it was a young pup. I had it there. I had a litter. I had a family come pick out like a red dog, and they saw the black dog over there, and they're like, "Well, I want a black one, actually." And it was older, so they could tell it was probably my keeper. But if I would have sold it to them, they would have took it, and they did end up getting a dog. But it was close. The wife was there, so they got a dog. If the wife wasn't there, the husband might have waited.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's interesting because I always try to tell people, I mean, I try to tell people like have a 1, 2, 3 in your head. I know pet people regardless, whatever color dogs you're breeding, pet people typically like markings. I mean, they get fixated on a certain marking, an eye patch, double eye patch, this color, red. I want a red one with black pigment. I want this, and me personally, color's the least um thing on my mind. Now, what I will say um that I think I'll say 2 things. A, if you have an all white litter, good luck. I mean, that is the toughest sell out there. And
yeah,
I love a good all white dog with strong pigment. That is just absolutely stunning to me. But the downsides to the all white isn't a color, it's the absence of color. So
yeah,
a lot of times with the all white stuff, A, you might struggle with pigment, but more so you're probably going to be more prone to skin issues, even sunburn sometimes. But when you do get those, whether it's a heavily colored brindle dog or like you have with the solid bodysuits, um, that introduction of color seems to produce a lot healthier overall um, skin issue type. It eliminates a lot of that. Have you seen that within your program since you've
yeah.
moved to the
The,
color?
the black dogs and the red dogs, I have less problems with. The dilute dogs, I don't know. I don't know if it's been just a coincidence, but small puppies like in the whelping box before maybe 5 weeks, I've even had problems like, hey, what's going on? Is this staph infection, some kind of strangle, something, where I've had to intervene with some with some topical stuff, and then they're okay. I haven't had too many dilute dogs. My oldest dilute dog is 8 months, and my youngest one is almost 3 months. So I don't have a ton of experience with the dilutes, but I've been hearing, it's a little harder to keep the dilute ones. You definitely don't want a kennel full of dilute dogs. And when I was bathing the older blue dog, I freaked out for a little bit because I thought it was losing its hair, but its fur. But what happens? I think it's just thinner. Right on the leg, while its fur was wet, it looked really light. It looked like there wasn't much there.
That's interesting. And now this is new territory for me. Now I will say on record that India, uh, a dog of mine who is really one of my true foundation dogs that I line breed, inbreed, I do everything. We just lost her recently, but that dog was blue fawn. She was in breeder's terms, a red dog with a dilute black nose, and she almost had like a gray, kind of a mouse gray kind of undercoat, if you will, kind of blended in there. So she definitely was off colored. She never threw a dilute ever, but I'm assuming it was just based on I didn't have anything that had a dilute gene in there that I bred her to. And then moving forward, even when I've done half sibling breedings off of her, I've never received a dilute. Now I wouldn't say that she I wouldn't say that she had any real skin type issues. Um but I will say that her fur was a totally different construct than my other dogs. Very soft, almost like a if you've ever been like around certain breeds of rabbits that have that real
Yeah,
fine, like super thin hair. That's how she was, which was interesting. And she's kind of thrown that soft coat in a full colored dog um, numerous times. So that's interesting that you say that. And you're seeing it from from early on, like
yeah.
4 or 5
From
weeks,
early,
yeah.
early, yeah.
Hmm. And, have you gone down the road now since you've kind of gotten a little more educated with the colored dogs? Have you gone into, like, using Embark to get those color panels to understand kinda what you
Yeah.
can get?
So I started using Embark because I actually had ICH, and I had
Mhm.
some puppies born affected, and I had to put them down, and it it was back to back. And the second time I said, no, I can't do this. I can't put another puppy down like this. I'm being careless. And I don't know. I almost wanted to stop having litters, but my family's like, nah, I just figured it out. So I did figure it out, and I figured out what it was and how it came in the lines of these dogs. And I started doing embark, and I started, spending time on the website and learning more, and then YouTube, of course, kind of brought me over to the color side of things, and that's why I have dilutes now, because my first black dog wasn't a dilute carrier. So when I actually bred her, I did wanted to find the right dog that I liked, that people had a good opinion about, whether it was color or not, that the dog could move and stuff. So I wanted to take those two dogs together so I could produce carriers of
Meaning
dilute,
the dilute
yeah,
carrier.
for the
Yeah, I
dilute.
gotcha. Yep. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that's a whole world I don't live in. And I know even when I spoke with Stephanie, she's just adamant about not having livered nose dogs, which I think you've had a couple, and we'll get to that. But she and her program just does not want the liver nose, which I have, and it's tough to get rid of.
Yeah,
Well, I shouldn't say that. It's not tough to get rid of, but it's hard to let good dogs go just because of their pigment.
exactly. It's kind of almost a not a dead end, but more like a speed bump. Like breeding for color, like the way I want. Like what happens when you just sell your best dog because it's not the right color, or you keep the right color and it's not the best dog. And I it's not as bad as Merle, because with Merle you just can't breed both two of them together, so it makes it harder. So like people who have programs with Merle in them and other breeds, I don't see how you just can't breed your best female to your best male, and they're not even related or very close related. So you can't even say that the breeding's too tight. That's one of the biggest challenges with having colors is you can or you can't. You keep the right thing or the wrong thing because of the color. It just makes it harder. It's one more thing to step over.
Yeah, I feel like as a breeder, and it kind of goes back to the conversation with her, and I've had this conversation more recently behind the scenes about like people searching for studs and that they're adamant that these dogs, they embark totally clear. And I question at times because, for me personally, I would much rather deal with a breed variant, if the dog is exceptional versus just going on a hunt for a dog that's clear of everything, but the dog itself isn't exceptional to me.
Yeah,
Um, and I think when you entertain color, it's just like, if we've got 5 or 6 breed variants and you put color on top of that, you really got a big net to kind of navigate
yeah.
through. It's more difficult for sure. With that being said, do you where are you at in your mindset now with taking color into account? And I know you sound like you're very what's the word I'm looking for? You're kind of adamant about trying to produce dogs that don't have flaws. Um eh, how are you taking into account, is it the color that trumps the flaws, or is it the dog that trumps the color in your program? Now, maybe not for other people, but for
Yeah.
your program.
So I can have some standard colored dogs if they're the right dogs. It doesn't matter. Like right now I have full body suit, they're not pied, and I have two of each color. I got to where I wanted to be. It's fine. I have some stud credits with standard color dogs right now that I'm just waiting to use. I have a all black dog, and she doesn't carry liver nose. She doesn't carry dilute. She's just black. So I could go that way and breed to some standard colored dogs. Some colored dogs will go out, and I'll just pick the best from there, and then I'll have a female that's probably the way I'll go. I'll have a female that's just standard color, and as long as she's a good dog, she can stay in the program. Or if she's not, then she'll probably be pet homed early, like 11 months.
Okay. And that's interesting you say that. So how do you a lot of this blood, it takes time to mature. I know for me, um, I used a 100% daily male quite a few years ago, and kept the actually I sold the pup to a pet home about a couple hours away, and the guy was cool, and I was like, man, you know what, here's the deal, it's a really nice pup. My buddy in that same litter, my buddy was supposed to get my pick male, but he wanted to make the selection, and I was like, that's fine, man, if the dog doesn't turn out, whatever. And he's like, oh, I want this dog, and I was like, you know what, this one's nicer. And he took the dog he wanted, and I pushed him down that way. And this other guy that was 2 hours away from me took the dog that I liked the most. And with that being said, this dog looked like a boxer at 1 year old. I mean, he did not look like anything I ever wanted to produce ever.
Yeah,
But at 2 years old, on almost on the dot, the dog's head exploded, the whole body exploded. He became, you know, a dog that's known for me as Ghost, but and he sired a few litters with me. Um, but he blew up. So how are you making that determination at 11 months that the dog isn't going to turn out for you? I'm like, what?
so
Well, I guess by what criteria
that's
is it
that's
showing?
mostly with females. I like to keep mostly females, but yeah, I'm hoping they're close. I tell myself by 11 months they've got to be 80% of what I want. And if they're not
Mm,
80% of what I want, then I don't I don't feel too uncomfortable. And then also, if it's 11 months and I decide, all right, it's time for you to go, I'm going to start finding a home for you, maybe start marketing you, and takes me 5 months, 6 months to find a home sometimes. And then all of a sudden, well, look at that, what a change. And then maybe I will breed her. Let's wait till the second heat, you know. If people aren't super serious about getting that certain dog that I was thinking about pet homing, then maybe I'll wait till like the second, third heat. We'll see, and then I breed them and see what goes from there.
Have you let a dog go that you regretted?
Yeah, uh, Peso, he's at Vergara. Yeah,
What at what age did you let him go?
a year and a half.
Okay.
He's
And
3 years now.
did you let him go to help their program, or was it something that you weren't looking to move forward with? Now, if I'm correct, that dog is off of Logic,
Yeah,
which I was trying to think who's behind Logic. Hard Times Rico?
Hard Times Rico, and then some Bay Area bullies. Tesla, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So Logic kind of hit the ground running. There was a couple guys I think that maybe co-owned him and they were really campaigning him pretty hard. You made the decision to use Logic?
yeah. I used Logic
Yep. And
early.
what was it about that dog that you were hoping to see in your program. Logic, for everyone that doesn't know the dog, obviously can look him up. I think he's currently in Canada with Leslie Rose. He's a very big bully male, all white with liver pigment.
That's right.
So what did you like about that dog in particular that you were trying to get into your program to move forward with?
So the phenotype was mostly what I wanted. I liked it. If I produced puppies with that phenotype, I would have been happy. The size and the proportions were mostly it, and then it really helps that how good of a job they did at advertising and marketing that dog. They did an excellent job. So uh, as soon as I put a breeding announcement there, I had people lining up that wanted puppies, and I sold no puppies because Peso was the only one to survive.
Okay, interesting. So what happened in that litter that he was how many pups were there?
There was four puppies,
Okay.
two males, two females, and then two of them died. I think within the second or third day.
Okay, and what were they presenting at the time that they were having issues?
They faded on me, but I didn't know what it was. They were acting like they were dying and stiffening up, and then they like their bodies would get loose again, and they were still alive, but obviously very fading. And they weren't getting food is what it was. They were just weak, and they wouldn't eat, and I tube fed, but they didn't make it.
Yeah, I had one litter that was similar to that. I had eh, the short stories, we ended up with 3 pups off the litter. They all came out gasping, like, they just were always like, just kinda always
Yeah,
weirdly taking these breaths, and we tried and tried and tried, and I don't think any of them lasted longer than maybe 48 hours at the most. Um, Now I've heard, and I don't have experience with this, and it's probably mostly because, um all mostly every dog that I'm breeding now is a dog that I've produced and it stays on my property. But I have heard that what some people or people claim as like fading puppies is actually canine herpes. Um, was the female that you bred him to a dog that you bought as an adult, or is it a dog that you had it from puppy?
I bought her as an adult and had four litters with her.
Oh, you did. So you hadn't had this problem
No,
before.
not
Hmm.
with her. No,
Okay. Okay. That's interesting because that would be canine herpes from my understanding, and I'm not,
I've
by no
I've
means.
had a lot of puppies fade on me throughout, and if it was canine herpes in my instance, I think I'd have a way bigger problem. So I think there was
Mhm.
something else. Uh, I've dealt with temperature issues. I've dealt with using the same whelping box and not painting it, and then having bacteria grow in it. So I've dealt with a lot of things, and I didn't know what it was till after.
Yeah, that's curious because I mean, I use the same. I've actually used the same two whelping boxes for every litter. Now they are painted, um, but and we, basically, I just before we have the litter, I get them out, I power wash them down. I just kind of scrub them
Yeah.
as best I can with bleach water, and they get set up, and it is what it is. Um, we're gonna get off topic here, but you say you had temperature problems. Um, what what is your ideal whelping setup? What do you find works best for you? I think when I was reading, we in some respect I think we do something similar, but maybe in others we don't. I'm just curious, I'm always curious about what people think is the best whelping setup.
So right now in my barn, I have two rooms framed up. They're 8 by 12 and they're insulated. I built them and sheetrocked them and then put like a vinyl siding 4 feet down all the way around.
Mhm.
And then for my whelping box, sometimes I use a kiddie pool with the pool
Mhm.
noodles as a hog rail. I like to do that because it's easy. It's easier to clean. I can get that thing clean in no time. Take the puppies out, put them in a tote, let the mom go outside. I spray bleach, hose it down, dry it, and put it back and get everything ready. It doesn't take me that long of a time. But when I have bigger litters, the couple pools that I have in storage aren't big enough for like 6, 7 puppies. So I also keep a 2 by 10 box. It's like 10 inches. Maybe it's a 2 by 12 because it's about 10 inches tall, and then a 2 by 4 for the hog rails. And it's a very sturdy, heavy box. And the dogs don't move it because sometimes I'll keep my kiddie pool in one area of the room, and then they move the kiddie pool all the way to the other side next to the heater or something, or
Mhm.
in front of the door. So the kiddie pool moves a lot.
Yeah, I use a 4 by 6 foot box that's 24 inches high, and then it has a two-stage door as you can it's got
Yeah.
basically got like a two-stage door so the mother can get out, but the pups can't. I find that a bigger whelping box I don't use hog rails. I find that and I've never had a puppy crushed, but I find that a bigger box seems to eliminate a lot of that problem, and then if you have, 7 pups, that box can kinda live the life of the entire litter through 8 weeks. Um, as far as temperature, um I'm a big proponent. Obviously, most people use a heat lamp or something. I mean, I try to keep my room probably in that low 80s and keep it there for probably the first 3 or 4 weeks. Is that similar to what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I shoot for 75, and I just have a gauge on a wall. I don't really
Mm,
use like a temperature like gun where I could shoot it, like
yeah.
point it at the whelping box and I know what it's in the whelping box because it makes a difference. It could be 5 degrees, no problem from where I keep my gauge at to where the puppies are. I use a heat lamp and I use a heater. I plug
Okay.
a heater into the room.
And then once the pups, let's say pups are getting to uh 4 weeks, you start weaning them. What's your setup then? Obviously, you can't live in
Yeah.
the kiddie pool.
So once the first one starts climbing out, I put a piece of plywood across half the room. I have beams because it's a pole barn. So from one pole to another 2 by 4 that I put in the room, I just have a piece of plywood that I screw to that, and then the mom can still get in and out because I have a door, like a doorway cut. And then when the mom doesn't get in there anymore, when they're completely weaned, then I just let the mom out or close the door so she can't get in there only when I want her to. And then I use cedar shavings, and they live in that would be a 4 by 8. Yeah, no
Mhm.
6. Yeah, like a 4 by 8 or 8 by 8
And
actually. Yeah,
oh, do you use the cedar shavings throughout, or do you, like, make a potty area and then, like, a sleeping
no,
area?
all shavings.
Okay.
Just all
Eh
shavings, and they pick their corner. I don't have issues with them. They pick their corner where they sleep, their corner where they go to the bathroom, and then their water's closer to where they sleep, and they do that on their own. I'm sure if I put the water, like for a whole nother litter, if I put the water on the other side, they'll start sleeping on the other side. Is
I got you. And how much I mean, if you're into bully dogs, how much assistance are you typically having to provide with your bitch during whelp?
It depends on the female because I've had some females that just needed me all the time, and I had some females where I just go in there and check and everything was good, and I would just sit in there and look at them, or record them or clean up after them, uh, switch the pee pads, let the mom out. That's it. Like I've had some females, like that female that I used to breed with Logic. She had no trouble. I never had to do anything with her. And I had another female where both litters, I had to be right there. And if I was gone for 4 hours, came back and checked, and gone another 4 hours, I might have lost two puppies that day, the first 3 days.
Okay.
So
And I thought I saw in your notes a couple things. One was maybe you've experienced hormonal imbalance during whelp, or maybe
yes,
probably more likely a calcium drop that typically can make dogs get real manic. A female, of her calcium, obviously she's producing colostrum and she's pushing out all this milk for the first time. Her body's going through a huge adjustment. And typically once those dogs start getting that calcium moving and producing that milk well during a whelp, that's when people really start having issues, especially with even with females eating their puppies, or getting manic and hiding them, doing all that kind of stuff. So are you giving are you supplementing in any way during the whelping process?
during whelping, no, I my females are on puppy food when they're pregnant, so they're on the puppy kibble. And I have had issues with the hormonal imbalance. I had my second female I ever had. She was very protective of her puppies. She would growl at me, probably like the first day and a half, and then it was fine. But she was a good mother. I had one female that to me she was hybrid because she was my bully female to a hybrid male that looked bully, and then the pups were like half and half. I had a very nice bully dog, and I had dogs that I would consider standard. And her first litter, one of those pups, when she grew up and I bred her, she backed me out of the room like a week into it. She couldn't be. I couldn't be in there. She was whelping. She was delivering her puppies, and she almost bit me. So what I would do is I'd open the door, whistle at her. She'd go outside. She'd be cool outside, but if I was there near her puppies, she probably would have bit me. And she was like that the entire time. I didn't have a single puppy survive. The last one survived until 10 days, and it was just hard. And I lost them. And I believe the last few I lost to staph infection.
That's weird. I've never dealt with any type of like skin allergies or skin issues, not allergies, but
Yeah,
issues at that age. Um, do you Let me ask you this. Are you using How early are you starting those shavings?
those shavings are probably when they start walking. When they
Okay.
start,
So
maybe the
up
last one's not walking yet, but most of them are walking. They go in.
and then and then prior to that, what are you using up to that point?
Sometimes I do add some shavings sometimes earlier than that, but it's usually blankets that I'm changing every other day.
Yeah. Yeah, I seem to think that like I've seen people with even females whelping in shavings. And for me, I feel like that's a good way to get mastitis. Another good way to get I forget what it's called when it's pio, but after they whelp, because it's called, starts with an M, but it's not going to come to me. But it's basically post whelping, uterine infection. Um, and I feel like the shavings are a good way to introduce or spread around issues, especially with the female around her nipples getting dirty and
Yeah,
having issues with that. So I typically, usually for about the first 4 weeks, just a bunch of old blankets. I go to Goodwill, or if somebody's got old blankets, we'll pick up some old blankets and then just wash them regularly. And then when the pups get old enough and they're on their feet, I usually try to separate. I'll do like 2 foot of the box will be shavings contained with a 2x4. And then the rest is just blankets, try to separate the
yeah,
potty from the living
that's
area.
pretty good for like 3 to 4 weeks. I'd probably try that just to
Yeah.
separate it, just so they're not on one as much. But yeah, after
Ye-
about 5 weeks, I gotta have those shavings, man. It helps the
Oh
smell
yeah.
so
Yeah.
much. Yeah,
Yeah. It's either that, or if you have an outdoor run, that's also, usually once they get to about 5, 6 weeks, if it's warm enough outside, I have an outdoor run that we put them in with the dog house, and they can go outside during the day, and that just helps to keep the box a lot cleaner, gives them some exposure to the outside. Um, but yeah, that typically helps cut down, especially if you get past, like, if you get past 6 or 7 pups and you're into the 10, 11, 12 pups, man, the smell will knock you over
Oh,
sometimes.
when I have about, I don't know, 6 puppies, and they're at like 8, 9 weeks, I gotta change those shavings out almost every day.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I actually don't use shavings now that we say that. I actually use the horse pellets, um, which are like sawdust pellets, and they kind of expand once they start peeing on them. And then you can kind of shuffle through there the first couple days with like a kind of like a litter scoop and get the big stuff out. And then eventually, about every 3 or 4 days, you end up doing the full change. So, okay, so interesting. So have you thought about maybe changing? And so for me, I use calcium as, when we start whelping, I'm a little bit more hands-on than you have been. The one thing I like to do is I like to be there. I don't really let mom um get the pups out of the sack. First thing is just it eliminates all the hernia risk with them pulling, being too aggressive. The other thing that I like to do is supplement with calcium as we go through the whelping. It just a lot of my dogs have whelped for 12 hours. I mean, just
Yeah,
a long run.
me
In
me as well.
and and it's so typically what I do is when I see that she's starting to go into labor, I'll give her, I think they're 1,000 milligram calcium tab, and then I usually give them one after each pup, just to kind of avoid that calcium drop. And I know that it takes a little bit time to absorb, but along the way, the other thing I do is I mix I mix cheap vanilla ice cream with cottage cheese, and I feed it to them probably every 2 or 3 pups, like if every maybe every hour, hour and a half, just to give them something for energy. Because if you get a dog in that 12, 13 hour run, man, they're exhausted, they don't want to push anymore. You're almost kind of coaching them to do so. Um,
So
maybe
I have done some cottage cheese in the kibble, and I've gotten him to eat it some. And I was also doing Tums before, but then I heard somebody say Tums didn't work. It wasn't fast enough, and they put up an X-ray where you could see the whole Tums in the dog's stomach, where she had to be rushed to the vet.
Yeah, I don't know that I've done Tums, but I force these capsules down their throat.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that.
I
And
bet.
and you know what? At the end of the day, I've had very few issues with dogs getting manic. Indy would probably be the one that gave me the most fits, and it wasn't that she got, like, aggressive or manic, but she wanted to hide her puppies. She
She
wanted to,
wanted to
like,
hide.
"I
Yeah,
gotta move these things. I gotta
yeah,
I gotta do something with them."
that's a
And
tough
I'm
one
like,
too.
Yeah, I
Like
and then you just find your
when I've
Go
had
on.
them going, whelping puppies for 12 hours, I'm usually there for the first, second, all of them. I'm there for like 4 hours, maybe going in and out of the room a few times. And then I got to like go get something or go pick up
Mhm.
my kid or something. And then I come back and another puppy's born. That's usually how it is for me when I'm whelping them. And then I've also noticed that the last puppies after it's been a few hours is not the same as when she was getting the first puppy out. You can tell they're tired, they're not paying as much attention. They're not on it. So towards the end is when I really want to be there. And I've always noticed I have them mostly die. The ones that were born last are the ones that die when I do have some that die.
Mm. Yeah, I yeah, I've had, knock on wood, I've had really low death rates along the way. Um I had the one litter, and that was the one litter that we lost all 3 was there's more to that story, that I think was a part of the pregnancy, stages that led to those pups not being, as viable as others. But typically for most of my litters, um, I not regularly do we lose any, but, it's tough when you do. And, from a breeder standpoint, yes, it's sad, but then sometimes I've lost some dogs that I look at him like, "That was the one." Even though it like, right away, you're like, "That was probably the one," and you just kinda gotta let it go. But, yeah, it's always breeding is a very, it's an emotional process, and you have to be able to, at some point, disconnect yourself from the process. My first and foremost concern is always the female, making sure that she doesn't have any issues and she makes it through. The pups are the second in the priority list, and we do our best to keep them all alive. But at some point, you have to question if if the puppy needs a shit ton of intervention. What is it going to be as it gets older? And you don't want to have something
Yeah.
that's
And those
you're just
problematic females too, they don't I don't keep breeding them. It's just too much. I've There's always a pattern that I've noticed when the female's problematic the second time, it's she's been problematic, and I usually don't give them second chances if it was bad the first time.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that, and I think that's a theme I've seen with the people that I've talked to so far. That good mothers create good mothers in their
Yeah.
offspring, and I think that a dog that struggles to whelp, I've noticed a dog that struggles to tie. Um, is probably not the best dog to breed. I had a female that she could not accept a live tie. Like, there was something about the mechanics of the way that she was formed. Um, she Now I AI'd her twice and had litters from her twice. Both litters had to be C-sectioned. So there was something, and to the point where in the second litter, I knew she was gonna have to be C-sectioned, to the point that she started to whelp, and I ended up driving her to the vet and had to keep pushing the puppy back in because it could get so far out, but it was getting locked in there. And
Oh,
literally showed up at the vet, and I'm, like, shoving this puppy back in, and the poor girl was like, are you good?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine." I'm like, "This is nothing. Just when you're ready, I'll just keep shoving it back in." And, all the pups survived, even the one that was started to
wow.
come out. So, yeah, it's wild, but I noticed after that, I was like, "You know what? I think I should have paid more attention to the fact that she couldn't live tie, and, that that should have been my tell all right there." Now, I will have to admit I have some really nice dogs off of her, um, but, ironically enough, the the female that I kept off of my first litter with her was also one that struggled,
Okay.
in she could, live whelp, but there was something internally with nutrition, along the pregnancy part that didn't seem to line up well. That was the one female that I had a litter of 12 pups that all of them almost had knee issues, which was very rare for me. And I just think, it's hard to tell as a breeder, but I just think there was something in utero that happened with her that those dogs weren't getting as much nutrition as maybe they should. Um, and then the second time I tried to breed, I made the decision to try to breed that same dog a second time, and be done with it. And that was the litter that at like 3 weeks she was huge, and I was like, "Holy shit, she's gonna have 12 puppies again." And then as she went on, as the weeks went on, she kept getting smaller and smaller. And I was like, oh man, we're not going to have a big litter at all. So she was either absorbing them, and that was the litter that inversely we had the three, and they were all gasping from day one. So, and clearly after that, I spayed her, and she's been sitting on the couch here forever. But
I've
beautiful
I've
dog.
never had to do a C-section, luckily. But I do AI most of my dogs. Most of my breedings are by AI. There have been some natural ties where, all right, I'm gonna get the dogs out. I usually put them both on leashes, let the male, kind of smell her and kind of get him ready to collect, and then boom, they just tied right there. So that's
Mm.
happened two times when I was planning the AI, but my males, my adult male Batman, he can tie a female, but I just choose to inseminate.
Are you doing that in house yourself?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's funny because I've heard other breeders, maybe not all American Bulldog breeders, but just some of the other podcasts I've listened to that are adamant if the dogs can't tie, if it's not a live tie, I'm not breeding the dogs, male or female, because I used a male that I don't know that they ever got a live tie out of him. We got a couple slip ties from him when I went out there, but we ended up AIing him. And I'm not sure that as he went on in his breeding career that they ever truly got a live tie off him, which is strange. Now the two pups that I got off that litter were amazing, but um, and they could live tie, but or at least the one that I kept and used moving forward. But yeah, so I don't know, I guess to each their own as far as,
Yeah, and then I've
this
also
or that.
had a couple females that they would just not accept the male in a live tie. Like, doesn't matter, I put them together on the leash from day 4 to day 14, and she's not having any of that male. Bit him, try to fight him, and it's just like, all right, we're gonna AI. And I don't know if it's genetic or something, because the daughter was that way, one of the granddaughters was that way. So I think that is mostly why I've been AIing. And since I learned to
Yeah.
do it, I do it. And then I know that if anyone wants to use my male, mostly my friends, I let the people, other breeders who I consider friends, use my males. And and so he's ready to collect because I know I can collect them.
So when you're doing your AIs, you're doing side by side. You're like you
Yeah,
said, you're getting the male aroused, which typically doesn't take much. I mean, I could bring Profit in right now, and I could collect him without anybody being in heat. He wouldn't care.
yeah,
He probably would thank me and give me a big old kiss afterwards. Uh, but then you're excusing the male, bringing in the female, and doing the AI.
yeah.
Okay, and have you noticed in your AIs that your litter count is smaller?
Yeah, I think I my average litter is five, 4 or 5.
Mm.
I do get
Have
8 sometimes, and I do get 2 or 3 puppies sometimes, but
Yeah, I definitely think there's a difference, as far as
timing.
well, timing is part of it.
Yeah,
Timing is part of it. The thing that you don't get typically, unless you really try to put some work into it, and I don't want to get too graphic into AIs, but for me, the way that I've done it is there is a way to stimulate the female to the point where she will orgasm, and that orgasm, if you notice when you put two dogs together, the female will almost grunt at times and like kind of tighten up in their bellies and that orgasming is
it
just sucking the semen back
proves
into
everything.
their yep, and that's the part that you kinda don't get when you AI 'em, that draw of the semen in, um, but you can, ironically, you can make a female orgasm if you
Yeah,
if you put some work into it. It's a little weird, but, um, yeah, it can happen, um but yeah, I would think that your litter count would go up with just doing the live tie. And again, I will say that I have had some females that just aren't as accepting. Um, Timing can play into that. If you think that the dog's ready and she's truly not, that could be part of it. I had a female that I produced that lives with another breeder that we've tried now 3 times to get her tied at my place. The first 2 times, I think he gave her to me a little late because she's a chain dog. The third time I told him I wanted her early, and I went and picked her up about a month early so I could watch her. I felt like my timing was right. She was just I could get her out with him and she would want to be playful, but as soon as he tried to get on her back, it wasn't that she was mean, she just started barrel rolling. And
yeah,
even to the point where I couldn't even hold on to her because she'd break my arm. But I finally had enough's enough. I brought both dogs down to my basement on the carpet and I kind of just reprimanded her. I told her, knock the fucking shit off. And she stood and we got her tied. It didn't take, and that was the only time that I've ever done a live tie that it never took, which was weird for me because we got her tied a couple times, and then I took her back home to the guy, and it didn't take. So, and I'm sure we're probably going to be back at it here in about 2 more weeks, I'm sure he's going to try
Yeah.
to do it again. Because I'd like to see the result of the breeding, me personally, but I don't know if she doesn't take it this point. I don't know that it's meant to be.
Yeah,
So yes, there are.
timing is a hard thing for me because out here I have it's 30,000 people and no one does same day progesterone testing for me. So I can get a
Mhm.
progesterone test done if I go up really early, show up 8:30 at my vet, they can draw the blood, send it out to the lab, and the next day about 3 p.m. I have the results. So,
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, obviously, I live in Columbus. Well, I live in the outskirts of Columbus, but I work in Columbus. There's obviously a little bit more resources with regards to uh, vets that are a little bit more
yeah,
um, qualified for breeding. And the place that I go to, they will draw the blood. And actually, I drive it over to the lab, which isn't that far away, um, to do that. I don't typically progesterone test anymore um, unless I'm traveling to use a guest stud. And I want to, if I'm traveling to use a guest stud, I want to make sure that the dog is ready. I'm not wasting my time. I'm not wasting their time. And then once I get the numbers that I want, and we know that she's ovulated, then I start getting on the road and put the dogs together. Um, but here locally at my house, kind of what I do is if I'm deciding to breed the dog, typically I try to get it in. I track everybody's heats, just so I know the general timing of the year that they come in. And then let's say I'm going to breed Goldie or whatever, and I know she's going to come in July. I'll probably bring her in late June, and then have her in the house so I can see what day one truly is. And then I usually breed like day 12, 13, 14, and then I'm done. I just do the 3 ties and I get it over with. I don't wanna introduce any more, bacteria or
cause infections.
contaminants. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. So I try not I'm not a big fan of I know a lot of other people have just put dogs in kennels together and left for the day, but I have a feeling that these males would just chew up a female, and just try over and over and over again. And, sometimes, especially if you're a heavy bully guy, sometimes these bully dogs will get so damn worked up. If they're not getting the tie, they'll just get to a point where they're on the verge of heat stroke or getting exhausted
yeah. No,
themselves. And then you have
they
an
can do
issue with
that.
that.
Even
Yeah.
with playing, I won't. Sometimes I think, oh no, I didn't put up my spring pole. I left my spring pole out. I really hope, my wife put the dog away. How I told her
Mhm.
with both locks on the gate, because I'd be afraid on a hot day that if my dog gets out and goes and plays on that spring pole, it might not stop.